Yo, this video contains spoilers about Season 8, Episode 3 of Game of Thrones. If you don't want to be spoiled about the Battle of Winterfell, don't watch this video. Okay, I love Game of Thrones. I really do. It's one of only a handful of shows I've ever watched all the way through. It has some of the most interesting moments, some of the most memorable characters, and some of the best dialogue I have ever seen in cinema or television. But at this point, it is impossible to ignore the drastic drop in the quality of writing, dialogue, and pacing that has continued unabated over the last 10 episodes, and you can make a very good argument the fall began well before that. Don't even get me started on the Butchering of the Dorne storyline, which is one of my favorite novel arcs in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire, but had a steamy, fat deuce dropped on it in the show. What was consistently great TV in the first 4 seasons, that had flashes of brilliance in seasons 5 through 7, has not started off well in this, the final act of the most expensive television series ever made. I still enjoy it, and I'm going to be there every step of the way from here on out, but Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night, had problems, and a lot of them. So, we're going to use Total War Warhammer as a canvas and some background eye candy to paint a picture as I discuss the episode and why the tactics used in the defense of Winterfell were so terrible. Look, it's easy to armchair general and Monday morning quarterback. You can look at any major battle in history and nitpick it to death after the fact. As cliche as it is, hindsight is 2020, but my god, there was some horrendous decision making last Sunday evening. From a visual perspective, amazing, bone-chilling, epic. To see a horde of screaming Dothraki plunge into the night with their flaming arcs, then have true darkness descend on them and seemingly snuff out any hope, super well done. To see zombies falling from the ramparts, from the rooftops like some form of divine punishment, incredible. And to see Winterfell, a place we have come to know and love and appreciate, completely overrun, it was special, and it was terrifying. But from a tactics and a logic perspective, the defense of Winterfell and the battle of the living versus the dead made very little sense. And that's part of the problem, right? It was very Hollywood. It was very turn off your brain. It looked awesome on the big screen, but then again, Optimus Prime and Megatron look awesome on the big screen too, but no one's actually sitting back and singing the praises of Transformers as art in cinematic form. More important people died at the Battle of Hogwarts and at the Battle of the Capitol in the Hunger Games, young adult novels, than in the Siege of Winterfell, in Game of Thrones, a show that for the last 7 seasons has told us that no one is safe, no matter how popular, no matter how important, no matter how good of a fighter or tactician they are. D&D, you guys have the largest budget in television history. Can you please hire a real goddamn military consultant and actually use their advice? Because unless they're just sniffing your butts the whole time, or you outright ignored what they told you, there is no way they signed off on the vast majority of what transpired on Sunday. And look, sacrifices have to be made in terms of realism to make for a good show. That's just a fact. No one is watching Game of Thrones for a dissertation on realistic battlefield tactics, and I don't need or want them to deliver that. We don't need to see sieges that last for 5 years. We don't need to see hyper-realistic combat. I get why they used flaming arrows in this episode, despite the fact that flaming arrows would not be effective at killing anything in a real-life scenario. But there is a huge difference between suspension of disbelief and outright lunacy. And too many times on Sunday evening, that line was crossed, and it was crossed badly. So, let's begin with the actual layout of the defense. I don't have a problem with fighting outside Winterfell at all. It's just not big enough to hold that many people. The Dothraki are useless inside. You can bring more archers to bear and fire from the safety of the walls for longer if you've got an army in front of the gate, and the cavalry actually has room to maneuver and do what they're meant to do if you fight outdoors. But just from the word go, before a single shot has been fired, there are some major problems. For one, the artillery is positioned in front of the huge pit of wooden stakes, the last line of defense before the walls themselves. Why? Why would you ever put catapults there? Move them back behind the infantry, make them the closest thing to the walls, and suddenly they have much more room to fire and much more protection against the incoming undead. Instead, they're placed directly behind the Dothraki, in and amongst the front and middle ranks, and as a result, they get completely overrun after the first volley and soon after the infantry combat is joined. They only fire one volley before they are completely inundated by a bunch of zombos. Same thing with the infantry. Why are the Unsullied forming phalanx in front of the stake pit? All this does is force an inevitable retreat into a choke point where you are guaranteed to lose way more troops than necessary. If the trench is moved out and upwards, and the phalanx is stationed behind it, then they can hold the line as the zombies impale themselves trying to cross it, and form a much more effective defense. Now, one of the most egregious examples of horrific battlefield tactics the entire night came with the Dothraki. We'll represent them with the Grail Guardians here because of their flaming swords, and how they must have felt when Lady Melisandre lit up the night sky and turned their Araks into Infernos of Doom. They must have felt pretty badass, pretty knightly. And look, adrenaline is a very real thing in combat scenarios. When it's life or death, when the chips are down, when it's fight or flight, and your sword is lit on fire alongside with thousands of your brothers, that can go to your head a bit and make you behave a bit foolishly. And the Dothraki are not the most tactical people to begin with. Great fighters, yes, not exactly known for their finesse though, but they know full well using cavalry to charge massed infantry formations of determined enemies does not work. It has never worked in history, especially when that massed infantry feels no fear, no pain, and no desire for anything but blood. But screw our own history. The writing in universe has already established that a high morale, severely outnumbered group of determined warriors can beat back a gigantic horde of cavalry. That's what the Unsullied did to the Dothraki at the city of Qohor. 3,000 Dovahgadis against 20,000 Dothraki Screamers. Guess who won? The determined, disciplined spear phalanx repelling the charge of 20,000 cavalrymen more than a dozen times and slaughtering the Cav, almost to a man. Every single Dothraki would be taught that story in a culture with a heavy oral tradition so focused on raiding and warfare. But let's take that a step further. Unsullied can do that. What do you think literally unbreakable troops who feel no fear, who feel no pain, could possibly do? Let's flip it on its head. Make the unbreakable mass of bodies severely outnumber the cavalry instead of vice versa, and it doesn't take a military genius to figure out that a frontal assault makes absolutely no sense. But the absurdity does not stop there. They can't even see their enemy. Their game plan is literally to charge into the void without even knowing what's waiting for them? Like, what? Imagine charging into an army you literally can't see. Just imagine that for a second. It really makes you think. You don't have to be Hannibal Bonaparte of the Galactic Empire to figure out that's pretty goddamn dumb. You don't even have to have an education, much less be even a mediocre battlefield commander, to realize that if you can't see your enemy or see what they're bringing to the battlefield, then charging headlong into their ranks from the front probably isn't going to work out very well. The entire point of a cavalry charge is a morale shock to break an enemy. But if your enemy doesn't feel fear and can't break unless you kill their king, something that the Dothraki prey on, they prey on morale. Their entire point is that they terrify you and make enemies run, but these enemies can't run, they don't feel fear, then they are going to be useless in a frontal engagement and instead should be used in an entirely different manner. So what they should have done is, 1, scout, so they actually get some vision of what the enemy army is actually doing and bringing to the battlefield, screen, harass, and ride alongside the undead army, which they could easily outmaneuver, and provide targets and lighting for the artillery to shoot at. That's how light cav is used. Even cataphracts or gendarmes in full plate mail wouldn't have done well in this fight, but the light cav can skirmish and provide intel and ride around the flanks and avoid combat while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That element was completely skipped over for cinematic value. Was it successful in the visual department? Yes, absolutely. It made the viewer feel fear. But there are ways to do that without killing off thousands of cavalry in 45 seconds. But okay, it's a plot device. The Dothraki are a problem for Westeros. They're a problem for Daenerys if she wants to take back the Iron Throne. Even if they weren't the brutal savages all of Westeros knows them as, it doesn't matter. Perception is reality. Many of the southern houses will not stand for a queen who uses them on the battlefield. And it's not like they would willingly become peaceful farmers once the throne is claimed and the war is over. So, okay, they needed to die. D&D got them good. They're out of the picture. Great. Let's talk about leadership. Incredibly important component to battlefield tactics. Commanders are the guys that make plans a reality. They give the orders. They control troop movements. They're the linchpin of an army. And it's a super tough job because everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. The second battle is joined in the maelstrom of noise and chaos, things are going to go sideways. There's no getting around it, and everything will go to hell. This element was shown very well. When Dany decides to commit the dragons way too early, instead of waiting for the Night King to show himself, this was a realistic mistake. Should Jorah Mormont, an experienced veteran, well-trained in the art of warfare, and also fluent in Dothraki, been able to avoid sending the Horse Lords all to their deaths in the opening stages of the battle? Yeah, probably, but the adrenaline got him to, and the fateful charge happens. Okay, what isn't realistic is putting all your commanders on the front ranks of the defense. These are some of your most precious assets and most gifted minds and warriors. Armies often rout from the field when they see their leaders killed in action. Why are Brienne of Tarth, Jaime Lannister, and all the named characters of the show sitting in the trenches literally on the front lines against 100,000 undead? I'm fine with them living through the battle. I would have preferred to see a few more main characters die in this episode, but they didn't, and that's fine. What's not fine is continuously putting them in life and death situations with zero hope of escape, and each time, them coming out of it unscathed. What's not fine is putting them on the front line against the undead, and then showing them in a literal mountain of bones and rotted flesh, where there would have been no room to even swing a sword, much less actually defend yourself, and then still somehow live. What's not fine is them going on to do that 7 more times throughout the episode in progressively more unrealistic situations, and each time coming out unscratched, and then being virtually the only people left at the end of it. Plot armor is one thing, but you don't have to make it so obvious. Let them lead from the middle or the rear, where good commanders would actually be. Let them lead from the walls, from the safety of Winterfell itself, directing troop fire, moving the chess pieces from on high. Don't expect me to believe that a one-handed cripple in shiny gold armor would survive the initial charge of 100,000 screaming whites, because it doesn't matter how great of a warrior you are. Casualties amongst the front ranks after receiving that charge would be completely 100%. No one would survive that. And you expect me to believe that every single one of our favorite characters all made it out? And then survive the same thing another 17 times? You lose all room for suspension of disbelief at that point. It takes you completely out of the moment. It ruins the immersion. It's not grounded at all. And guess what? Game of Thrones is a show that was built around being a grounded medieval setting. Yes, there are elements of fantasy, but when you jump the shark like that, it's very obvious, and it's not a good look. It is eye-rolling to continuously play that card over and over where someone's about to die, and then you just say, oh no, somehow he survived, and not even show what happened on screen. Samwell Tarly should have been dead 50 times over by the end of this episode, but of course he survived because people like him. But if you don't put them in that situation in the first place, if you let a few more unsullied and Stark soldiers actually survive, form a protective ring, a last stand around our heroes so they're not on the front lines the entire time, then okay, it gets a bit easier to stomach. And then you have the Crypt of Winterfell itself. Please explain why no one thought that hiding in a resting place for the dead against an army that everyone knows raises the dead would be an absolutely horrendous idea. Can you imagine? Jon Snow tells everybody the horrors of watching the Night King's ranks swell at Hardhome as he lifts his fingers, and the dead rise once more to stalk the north. Oh, I know. Great idea here. Let's go hang out with the dead in a deep, dark, scary vault right next to all their tombs. What could possibly go wrong with that idea? Lazy ass writing, man. No other way to say it. I mean, the idea of Sansa Stark's actual family, a line stretching back generations coming out of the crypt from her own home to try and murder her, is absolutely terrifying. So I get why they did it, and there's an element to it that's really creepy and really cool, but this is the kind of thing that separates seasons 1 through 4 from season 8. Do you really think Oberyn Martell or Tywin Lannister or season 3 Tyrion would have let that happen? No. No chance in hell. And so we get the cool factor, but not that smart factor that made Game of Thrones what it is. You want the good show, but you need the bad writing. Hey, dumbasses, don't hide in a crypt when the dead are coming to raise the dead. Easy. Hide literally anywhere else. So from a tactics perspective, they handled the Night King pretty well, I thought. I mean, Jon and Dany definitely messed up, but their screw-ups were relatively realistic and certainly in character. It's very easy to Monday morning quarterback there and talk about all their mistakes, but in the heat of the moment, after watching a third of their army die instantly, perfectly reasonable to commit the dragons and begin burning and hunting for the Night King. And Jon didn't want to. He wanted to stick to the plan, so I thought that part was fine. When the zombies got stuck at the kill box at the stakes, I feel like Drogon and Rhaegal should have been going down, doing a lot of close air support, sweeping stuff up with the flaming breasts, as should There should have been more reserve catapults and archers on the walls that were doing stuff to all those guys who were just standing there at the stake pit, because they were stuck there for a long time and not doing anything. Feel like a lot of damage could have been done there, but regardless, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many they killed there. They weren't going to win any other way but besides killing the Night King. But I think that there were some tactics there that could have been employed that would have made the attack much less effective. And one of the best ways to do that is fortifications and obstacles to break up the plains outside Winterfell with more pits, more choke points, and canals that force the dead into spots where the artillery could lay waste to them and would have been a lot more useful. So I'm thinking more of those stake pits, more of those rocks and different things to slow down, break up the terrain, and force those zombies into a choke point so the artillery can blow them from above. But the overall plan of luring the Night King to the Godswood to strike the head off the snake was a very intelligent one, and it's something we see echoed in Warhammer all the time. Kill the vampire leader, the undead army in his thrall crumbles. Perfect. What was dumb here, and what I sincerely hope we get some answers to in the next few episodes, is Bran's seeming uselessness in what should have been his moment to shine. Because his entire story arc for the last 5 seasons has revolved around him being the light in the darkness, this mirror of the Night King and spiritual protector of humanity. And yet all we saw out of this powerful warg who can control animals and enter people's minds was him dropping some poops on the White Walkers with his flock of birds. Yes, he engineered the whole thing. Yes, he gave the dagger to Arya and likely foresaw elements of what this outcome could potentially be. And yes, he is a historian and chronicler for humanity, and part of what he was doing was probably observing this pivotal moment in history so it could be shared later. But there really needed to be some kind of intimate moment between Bran and the Night King that actually explained their motivations, that connected the first moments of the show to the last moments of the Undead, that gave us a reason to, if not empathize with the Night King, at least explain the biggest mystery and climactic moment of Game of Thrones up to this point. It needed a flashback similar to the one where we saw the Children of the Forest show Bran what happened to the Night King when he was first formed, why they did it. We needed some kind of catharsis there to actually explain what the hell was going on and what the Night King was doing. It needed a huge payoff right then, right there, because this is what the entire show for 8 seasons has been building towards for almost a decade. But we didn't get it. The ice just melts. The undead army just crumbles. Arya gets the killing blow, and it all just kind of feels pretty damn hollow. So much buildup, and then very little. If that's truly the end of Bran's story arc, if there's truly no more undead, no more explanation or exposition of the Night King and Bran's part to play in it all, I venture to say it would be one of the most disappointing and unfitting conclusions in TV or cinema history. Catastrophically bad. I'm gonna hold my breath for now and say, I think that more will be done with it. More needs to be done with it. I think we will get more of a payoff there, more of an explanation on that front, but even still, I kind of fear the time is already passed to make viewers feel the full weight of it. Because the Night King is dead now. More exposition loses its power when the threat it's supposed to explain is no longer a threat, and the Night King is gone. With that said, there were a ton of great moments from this episode. Arya's escape from the undead in the keep was very well done. Stupidity of hiding in a crypt aside, the crypt attack was also very claustrophobic and very creepy. And I love the idea of having Sansa's family rising from the dead to try and kill her. Just a horrific thought and very well executed, despite the fact that, again, nobody should have been hiding in a crypt when the undead are raising the dead. Makes no sense. The foreshadowing and connections and relationship building that has continued throughout the series came back around in a big way here, and the payoffs with Melisandre and Arya were also very well done. And of course, it felt big budget, wildly cinematic, and epic to watch. The shots with the dragons above the cloud cover were some of the best in the entirety of the show, and the whole thing was frenetic, and still, despite all the massive amount of problems, I still found the episode entertaining. Unfortunately, it's not the same kind of entertainment I got when Oberyn Martell was first introduced, or when he talked with Tywin or Tyrion in the dungeons before his execution, or Tywin's long talks with Arya and Cersei. Seriously, go back and watch Tywin and Jaime talk about the importance of family as Charles Dance skins a deer in the first season. Just 2 people talking in a room with a dead animal. That's all it is. But it was riveting, and nothing in Season 8 has lived up to such a simple, brilliant moment quite yet. Lyanna Mormont was a fantastic character. Her introduction was super good, fantastic actress, and even though her kill on the giant was hardcore fan service and indicative of a larger problem with the show, in that D&D seemed to continuously be doing the things that look cool rather than the things that are logical within the setting that's been established over 7 seasons of TV, I was actually fine with it and found myself pretty hype when she killed the giant. But again, I still think it would have been better to have her just get smeared when the giant first charged in, because that would have been a good and logical subverting of expectations and reminded people that when little girls try and pick fights with big scary monsters, they're going to lose. They're going to die just like everyone else. So, in conclusion, don't suicide your cavalry into the darkness. Put artillery in a more heavily fortified area behind the stakes, not in front of them. Don't let your artillery get overrun instantly, because they are by far your best tools, besides the dragons, for causing mass casualties and killing many undead quickly and closing off areas of the field with their burning ammunition. Utilize the killing fields outside Winterfell better, with more traps, more obstacles, more choke points designed for maximizing casualties. Don't put your commanders on the front ranks of combat, because that's stupid as hell. Don't Deus Ex Machina every 3 seconds with major characters just for fan service and cheap thrills. If you don't plan on killing them, don't put them in consistently dire positions in the first place, because it completely loses its impact when we see Samwell on the ground for the umpteenth time, crying and being swarmed, and then 5 minutes later, we see him in the exact same position in another area of the castle, and miraculously, still not dead. If you have one such moment in the entirety of the episode, okay, I'm with you. It's a seemingly hopeless situation, and they did a fantastic job of making it feel so. It felt grim, it felt brutal, it felt dark, and it felt desperate. But don't overdo it, and don't keep doing it over and over again and expect people to stay in the moment and care. Because when I see Sam on the ground for the 7th time, crying, and again, he's got zombies crawling all over him, I'm just like, okay, they've already decided they're not going to kill him. I'm no longer invested in that moment. Entertaining episode, some great scenes, but a far cry from the best times of the show. Much like the Battle of the Bastards, lots of visual flair and eye candy, and elements of the battle itself were done incredibly well to a much higher standard than you'll see out of most other shows or even movies. The claustrophobia of the Battle of the Bastards being a prime example, but the actual battlefield tactics and strategies fly in the face of reality, fly in the face of logic. They were really dumb, and there were just a bunch of illogical moments at every turn. Just like Jon Snow abandoning his defensible position with a numerically inferior force. Just like him taking the bait after Rickon's death. Just like an entire army of thousands of men somehow being perfectly surrounded and enveloped by a perfect regimented shield wall. Looks cool, makes no sense. Could have been better, should have been better. I seriously hope the writing improves dramatically as we move into the final 3 episodes of the series, but I'm not gonna hold my breath. I think the best moments of Game of Thrones are long behind us now, and that's very unfortunate, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Let me know what you guys thought of Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night, and the direction the show is taken, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.